That is what is happening inside the school systems today. Not only that, but our child also has to sit behind a plexiglass with a mask on their face. What it does to my heart, by the way, when I see these children, itty-bitty 2-year-old toddlers, walking around with a mask on their face. Think about the psychological trauma of that. Think about the fact that right now in America, there are children that believe that that is normal because they've never seen anything different. There are children that believe it's normal to ask their parents where their mask is because they've never seen anything different. Do you guys realize what's going to come around the bend? People ask me why I was so outspoken, how I take such strong positions early on, and when people are unsure, right? I'm constantly in the press, I'm constantly getting killed because I go right for the jugular, no questions asked. Because I can always predict the crazy. I just have a remarkable ability to just see the crazy coming down the block, you know? I could just see it. I will never forget the viciousness that I was hit with by both sides of the aisle, by the way, when the Me Too movement appeared, came out of nowhere. You know, suddenly it was hashtag Me Too, and it was trending on Twitter, and every girl was sharing their stories, and conservatives were silenced, and the left was giving them a platform, and everyone was saying, this is good. This is great. This is, of course, we should be talking about sexual assault and rape and rotten industries. That all sounds like a good thing, and it was so obvious to me that the left was going to use that as a tool to take people out, right? To say that we no longer believe in due process, that on the basis of a mere allegation, someone should be forced to step down from their job. I mean, I saw that crazy coming, right? And of course, this is what the left does. They like to create issues. They like to talk about issues that make people uncomfortable. We're dignified people. We don't want to be in a room. You never want to say to someone, oh, okay, maybe there's something wrong, you know, with just condemning people instantly for sexual assault allegations because we're good people. Of course, but the reason that they go across and they find these subjects that make us uncomfortable is because it gives them so much power. When you're talking about race, they want white people to shut up. When they're talking about sexual assault, they want men to feel uncomfortable and for them to shut up. And when people are shutting up, that is when the left gets the most yards in the culture war, right? That is when the left runs the game in the culture war. Their goal is to make you feel uncomfortable to use your voice. Their goal is to silence Americans. People keep talking about the silent majority. I'm tired of the silent majority. I just want people to be the majority. Start speaking out and saying what you believe. Because if you don't, we're going to lose this country. We are, in this moment, right now, sitting in this auditorium, we are losing America. You know that, I know that. We've got a senile puppet for a president, right? And we've got a bunch of journalists that are basically trying to make it so that conservatives are not allowed to speak or meet or talk anymore. They used January 6th as almost a false flag operation to push through a bunch of radical change, because that's how the left operates. The left always needs an existential crisis to push through radical reform. Okay? And if there is no crisis, they will create one. They will make sure there is a crisis. They will take something that is bad and they will turn it into something that is terrible, because they need to make sure that you are fearful in order for them to execute radical reform. This is what happened during 9/11. We were told after 9/11 that this is just going to be temporary. Right? We're going to change some things around the Patriot Act. You're going to have to take your shoes off. We're going to have to look through everything you have. We're going to have, we're going to have this whole system when you go through the airports, but it's for your safety. Existential crisis, government takes control. And when government takes control, they never give it back. I think the only time I was outspoken and against Donald Trump when he was in office was with the coronavirus, when he made the decision to temporarily shut down all of America for a couple of weeks because he was facing so much mounting pressure. And I disagreed with him publicly, and I said to so many people who were so fearful in that moment that when you are feeling fearful, you have to pause and you have to think. Fear is the name of the game. Fear is how they seize control of the country. Their entire job is to make you fearful so that they can seize more control. And I knew the second that he made the decision to shut down the country, I asked people, I said, do you understand that now we've just made it okay forever when he is not president? I know you think he's not going to abuse it. Of course we didn't think he was going to abuse it. But Donald Trump was not going to be president forever. And now we have just said that it's acceptable, that we have now set that precedent for the government to come in, to shut down our businesses, to tell us to stay at home, to force mask us, and to tell us what we are allowed to do and who we are allowed to see. You don't get those kinds of freedoms back. We set a very dangerous precedent. I don't think a single person in this room disagrees or didn't believe that the coronavirus was real. Of course, we understand that viruses in general are real. Viruses happen all across the world. They happen, smallpox happened during the Revolutionary War, right? There are plagues that happen, there is suffering that happens. It's a condition of humanity. That was never the point. That was never the purpose of me speaking out against the shutdowns and against the lockdowns. It was because I realized that we were implementing a system, a global system, that was allowing people to take control and to take freedoms away from Americans. That's the situation that we're in today. That's the situation that we're in right now. That is why I've used my platform to speak out against this. People ask me, where do you get the courage from to just go out and to say something and to just say what you believe over and over and over again? And I always say that I look at the situation around the world, and you study history, and you learn about these absurd situations in other countries historically, and you go, how could that ever happen, right? How did so many people in a country allow such sheer evil to take place? It seems unfathomable when you look back at different countries and you study socialist regimes, when you study the Nazi Party, when you study, Mussolini. It seems impossible that an entire country of people allowed it to happen. Even when you look at Venezuela, forget history, think of present, right? You go, how is it possible that Venezuela should be one of the wealthiest countries based on its oil reserves? How is it possible that its people allowed this to happen? Well, this is how it's possible. This is how it's possible because people were too fearful to speak out. Because people were too fearful to be called a name. You're too fearful because you don't want your neighbor to call you a racist. Don't you think those people that lost their countries completely, if they could look back and say, man, I would have been actually totally fine being called a racist. I should have said something. I should have said this is wrong. Man, I would have been totally fine losing a couple of friends. I should have said something before we got to where we are today. I bet all of those people that lived in those countries during those times think that in the retrospect. What are the things that you can do? There's another question I always get. Candace, what can I do? You have a platform. First and foremost, if you're thinking, Candace has a platform, so it's easier for her to say things. You're right, now it is, but 5 years ago, I was you. I was a person that had nothing but something to say, right? And I created my own platform on YouTube. And I always say to people in every room that you have to remember that it is what you do individually, decisions that you make individually that are going to transform this country. It is the businesses that you stand behind, the products that you buy, the things that you tweet. Not everybody is the same person. I'm not saying everybody should go be me on Twitter and trend for 3 years because you just can't stop calling the left out on their BS, right? But we are in a cultural war. And in every type of a war, you have to figure out what you can contribute. Maybe you are a fighter like me. Maybe you are a front line fighter like me. Maybe you are willing to go out and to be smeared and to be libeled and to lose your friends like me. But maybe you're somebody else. Maybe you're a writer. Maybe you're a person who wants to write, who wants to create a website, who wants to get together a bunch of journalists, a bunch of patriots to write the actual truth. Maybe that's who you are. Battles and wars need those people as well, right? Maybe you're the person who's got so much money it would be so easy for you to just finance the war, right? To sit back and say, I don't want to get my hands dirty, but let me stand behind some people that are willing to fight. I'll never forget that when I was on YouTube, when I started my channel, there was a man who lived in San Diego who reached out to me after I made my first video. I had quit my job, and I had no idea beyond 3 months how I was going to be able to survive and pay my bills, but I knew I had to start saying something. And a man in San Diego reached out to me and said, I really believe in you, kid. I want to give you $5,000. What that $5,000 meant for me was that I could keep the lights on and I could keep fighting, right? Think about that. For him, it was nothing. It was a drop in the bucket, but he found somebody who was saying something and he was doing something, and he wanted to sponsor that individual. There are people that are like this in this room. I know that. Maybe you stand behind the organizations. Maybe it's you that gets people to run in elections. Because let me tell you something. For all the fighting that's happening in D.C., it is the local elections that matter the most. Run for the school board, right? We never hear these discussions being had, but we need to start thinking about the local elections. We need to start thinking about how we are going to make sure that this poison does not make it into the classrooms. We need to start making sure that the state houses are doing everything they can to clean up these elections, because let me tell you, if mail-in ballots are the way of the future, you can say goodbye to America. Full stop. I am not an extraordinary person. I'm not. And I make such a point to make sure people in every room understand that. I'm an ordinary person who is doing extra things right now, because every ordinary person should be doing extra things right now in America. I had a baby 4 months ago, 16 weeks. And it's so funny because I remember sitting down with Ali Stuckey, who's a podcaster, and talking to her on my show. And she had just had a child, and she said, oh, motherhood softens you in all the right ways, and I can't wait for everybody to have a child. She's like, even AOC, I want her to have a child. She said this. And she said, because things change when you have a child, and your perspectives change when you have a child, and you become softened. And I was so excited when I got pregnant because I was waiting to get softened, and lo and behold, it hardened me. And it hardened me because suddenly I look at my child and I look at him and I think, is he going to grow up in the same America I'm going to grow up in? Suddenly the fight is a lot more serious for me, right? Before it's a political perspective, now it's my child's future. Is my child going to have to think that this is normal? It started for me and realizing what the left was doing. And I had to kind of think, how do we fight as conservatives? And I had to reverse engineer and think, when did this start for me? When did I start believing this poison? And it takes me back to my childhood. It really does. Because I really do believe that everything that the left is after right now in this country is destroying families, right? And because sometimes you look out and you go, what are they doing? Like, it just seems like they're everywhere all at once, just starting fires, a little fire over here, a little fire over there, and we're just running side to side trying to put the fires out. And what's actually connecting all of these fires if the left is starting? All of these fires if the left is starting, what is the connection? What is the thread that ties them all together? Why are we talking about gendered, non-gendered restrooms, right? Like, that seems like a random fire to start. Like, nobody ever was stressed out when they saw the word bathroom on a sign. No one was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But the left picked up this battle and they stuck it to us, and suddenly we are like really in the throes of, we need bathrooms that say non-binary, full inclusion. We've got more than 26 genders. Like, why did they pick that particular battle, right? Then you look over and then you see the feminist camp, right? And you've got the women that are screeching about the patriarchy, and they want to undo traditional families, and they need men to understand how horrible and backwards they are. And they're going, why is feminism becoming so toxic, right? It's not so much toxic masculinity that concerns me as much as toxic feminism does right now in this country. You go, what's up with that, right? Then you think, what the heck is going on with, okay, you guys, you had the abortion battle, and now they're talking about wanting to abort children at 9 months in the womb. What the heck is going on? What do these three crazy things, all of these crazy things that the left is doing, have in common? And the answer is family. That's what the left is trying to do. They're trying to destroy family. If you've studied Karl Marx, if you've studied the Communist Manifesto, you know that Marxists have always wanted to attack the family. That was seen as a structure that had to be destroyed in order for Marxist ideology to flourish. So when you say, why are they telling kids to pick their genders? Why are they encouraging children to mutilate their bodies, right? Telling them in kindergarten classrooms that they can pick their genders in California. In certain districts in California, they've already passing that down, that children can pick their genders. They're trying to push through policies that allow children to get gender reassignment surgery before they are even of age. There are children that are running around saying, I am in the wrong body, I am a non-body. This term didn't exist when I was in school, right? So I know that this child is being taught that because it didn't exist 10 years ago, right? The purpose of that is because a child that mutilates their body will never have children, will never have offspring. You've already destroyed the family. When you talk about the radicalization of that, they're after family, right? When you talk about feminists and why they are constantly attacking men, and trying to genuinely raise women up to believe that they should not aspire to traditional family roles, where they're telling women to do more. You should be the CEO of a company. You shouldn't think that you have to have children. You shouldn't want to have children. You should want to be both the man and the woman. In fact, at the same time that they're encouraging women to act more like men, they are encouraging men to act more like women, right? It's bizarre. It's totally crazy. They're constantly telling men this is toxic masculinity, all displays of masculinity are wrong, at the same time that they're telling women to man up. And that's to create confusion. That's because that will eventually corrode the values of family. And families will always be in the way of big government. And socialism is big government, right? They need to make sure that children that are coming up do not turn to their mother and their father at a dinner table for answers. It's the same reason why they are so actively trying to destroy the pillar of faith. Talk about a pinnacle that I thought we'd never reach in this country, shutting down churches during COVID-19, right? What was that all about? I lived in D.C. during that time. They were shutting down churches. We could no longer go to church during COVID-19. And you say, why is there this attack on churches? Why are they trying to make preachers and pastors take on this leftist ideology? Well, it's because once you remove faith and once you remove family, the government becomes the faith. The government becomes the family. They want people to drop down on their knees and say, I'm in pain, not God, how can you help me, but government, how can you help me? What policy can the government give me to help me get on my 2 feet? That's what they want. They want to marry people to the government. The experiment, when you talk about that, when they first started realizing that that could actually be done and done successfully, was with Black America. Black America has always been the testing ground for leftist policies. Black America has always been the experiment for Democrats. When I wrote my book, Blackout, I had quite the fight. Thank you very much. You guys have no idea how hard I fought to write that book with Simon & Schuster. I'm probably one of the only conservatives that actually wrote their own book. Usually they get a ghostwriter, put their face on it, and that's it. I wrote every single word of that book, and it was an uphill battle with Simon & Schuster, who wanted to gut it and turn it into something else. From the beginning, from the subtitle. I picked the subtitle of the book, Blackout, How Black America Can Make Its Second Escape from Democrat Plantations, right? And the Simon Schuster said, oh no, that's too strong, right? It's offensive. I'm like, that's the point. And then the Washington Post ran a hit piece on me saying that I've popularized the phrase, Candace Owens has popularized the phrase amongst Republicans, Democrat plantation, and how dare she? That is so offensive. That's the point. But not only is that the point, I then wrote an entire chapter describing what I meant, because I wasn't saying it to just be offensive. I was saying it because I meant it. And I want you guys to understand this. Democrats never stopped their plantations of slavery. They just updated them. They remodeled them. They refashioned them for the times. When you think about the times of slavery, you think about what it actually took for a plantation owner to maintain its slaves. One element was that they had to make sure via slave codes that no slave was allowed to learn to read. Okay? No slave was allowed to learn to read. That was actually such a crucial philosophy, such a crucial law, that if you were a white person during those times and you were teaching a slave to read, you could also be charged. You could also be punished. You say, Candace, that doesn't exist today. Black people are allowed to learn how to read. Really? 75% of black boys in California can't pass a basic reading exam. Across 5 schools in Baltimore, they couldn't find a single child that was proficient in reading and writing. A single child across 5 schools in the inner cities. You want to know why they're teaching critical race theory? You want to know also why they're pushing that down the pipeline? It's to make sure that the kids are dumber and dumber and dumber, and yet convinced that they're super educated. And I don't say that in jest. I do not say that in jest. If you read Thomas Sowell like I do, which I recommend you do from cover to cover always, he wrote a book called Inside the American Education System, The Lies, the Dogma, and the Deception. And in this book, I was floored to learn that Americans that are living right now, we are producing literally, I'm not saying this to be funny, the dumbest kids that have ever existed in America. From a standardized test perspective, these are the dumbest kids. You say, this is math, this is reading, answer these questions. These kids are the dumbest. Yet, here's the interesting part. We have never given out more degrees. So these kids have the most degrees, and yet they are factually speaking dumber than they've ever been. That's an interesting equation, right? It's an interesting equation. You got to think about that. You have to say, why would we do that? Why are we handing out degrees? How is it possible that we're handing out more degrees? These kids have the most degrees that we've ever had, and yet they're dumber. How does that work? Well, it works because if you do a cursory search and you see what children can actually study in school, you'll be shocked what you can get a degree in. You can get a degree in gender studies. I thought I'd check it off in kindergarten when they said 2 genders, boys' bathroom, girls' bathroom, right? Now you can spend 4 years learning what it took me in 1 class in kindergarten to learn. That's a meaningless degree. You can get degrees. You can get degrees in civic responsibility, social responsibility. They're handing out woke degrees and keeping kids for 4 years, putting them in debt $100,000, like me. I had $100,000 of student loan debt, to give them a meaningless degree. Why are they doing that? Well, because they know that these kids will come out and they will know nothing, but they will be convinced that they know everything. They want them to be passionately stupid. That's the only way to describe it. To be passionate about their stupidity. And you might say, why does the government want that, right? Because imagine being a kid who spent 4 years getting your gender studies degree, being so convinced and so pompous and so arrogant and going out into society, and finding out that you can't get a job. Because as it turns out, we don't need that many people that are majors in gender studies to get the day going, right? And so you imagine being that kid who then sees the kid that he went to school with that didn't go to college. That kid's fixing air conditionings, and he's making 6 figures because it turns out we need a couple of people that can do some plumbing and can fix some air conditionings. And so what happens to that kid who went to college? He becomes angry. He becomes angry because he feels like he was robbed. He's angry that that kid is more successful than him and he went to trade school. He's angry that that kid maybe tagged along with his dad to work and he's making more money than he is, doesn't understand it. So of course that kid thinks the system is broken. I did everything right. The system is broken. And that kid has learned in school that the system is broken because capitalism is backwards, because capitalism is wrong. So that's part of the plantation economics, right? Make sure the slaves don't learn. I meant it when I said that. The second piece of Democrat plantations when they were maintaining them in the South was ensuring that families were torn apart. Isn't that something, right? They needed to make sure, and I remember reading Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery. In the first chapter, he talks about how when his mother died, he felt nothing. Because as a slave, it was nothing to lose your relatives. You just constantly were being traded from plantation to plantation, so they wanted to make sure that they were severing familial relations. Does that answer your question when you look up and you say, how is it possible that families are so destroyed? That in the 1960s, there were about 20% of African-American families that were being, African-American children that were being raised without a father in the home, and they thought it was a crisis. Today, that number is 75% of black children that are being raised without a father in the home. Father absence is one of the biggest epidemics that we are facing in this country, if you want to talk about a pandemic. When I said bring back manly men, when I said we need masculinity, I meant it. I meant it. We need strong men to raise strong families, to lead strong households. The left understood that. The left understood that forever. The Democrats have understood that forever, and that is the reason why they routinely attack families. It's why they want your children to mutilate themselves. They want to make sure they're so confused and so backwards. By the time they wake up, it'll be too late. It'll be too late because your family will be broken down in 1,000 different ways. That's why they want abortions, more abortions. That's why they want people to believe that it's irresponsible to have children, says the Green New Deal. It's irresponsible. Because the planet's going to be dead in 10 years. How many of you guys survived the planet being dead from what time you were in high school? Because I was told, crazy. Look at that. We should go buy a lottery ticket, right? When I was growing up, it was global warming. Global warming was going to get us all. The polar bears were going to drown, and we were going to die. And then I learned, and I believed it, of course. They made us all watch in school Al Gore, I almost said Al Sharpton, Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And they said the planet's going to be gone. Right? It would be irresponsible for you guys to have children. We need you to be activists about the environment. Little did I know that they had done that over and over again. There was the ozone layer. There was the acid rain generation. Those poor kids. Imagine being scared every time it rained. Imagine if you lived in, like, Seattle. That would be horrible. I mean, like, just... There was global cooling, that generation, global cooling. They were told that things were going to freeze over. And over and over and over again, because at the end of the day, they're already trying to tell children, converting them into little activists, using the environment as a new type of religion, right? Pledge your faith to environmentalism. The left knows that faith is never destroyed, it's just replaced, right? They want to destroy faith in God, they want to destroy faith in family, and they want to replace it with another type of obsession with environmentalism, obsession with all of these isms that they can create. They want you to worship government. They want the family to be destroyed. A third element of democratic plantations, and this one is my favorite because people said, okay, well, this definitely doesn't exist anymore, right? They used to whip slaves. They used to beat slaves. They used to sever slaves' limbs so that if they got caught trying to escape the plantations, when they got back, they would sever their limbs because they wanted to teach the other slaves, don't you dare. Right? That was a part. It was a part of maintaining a plantation to make sure that the slaves didn't get any ideas about their own freedom. And you go, okay, well, Candace, that's definitely not happening. I challenge you to think again. I challenge you to Google my name. I challenge you to Google the name of any black conservative that has had the audacity to pick up and walk away from the Democrat Party, and let me know what comes back at you. It's a figurative lynching. They attempt to destroy your reputation. You read my Wikipedia page, you read about Larry Elder, you read about Clarence Thomas, you read about Condoleezza Rice, you read about every single black conservative, Dr. Ben Carson, a literal brain surgeon who has about 1 million hits calling him stupid, okay? About 1 million hits calling a literal brain surgeon stupid. Why? Because he had the audacity to get up and to walk away from Democrats. And that's not a fate now that's just for black Americans. When I'm talking about these plantations, they're not just for black Americans. They reserve the worst treatment for black Americans because they see something proprietary. Candace Owens should not be speaking in a Republican room. Candace Owens should be owned by me. We created a system dating back to the 60s for black Americans. They should be married to the Democrat Party. LBJ built that beast. He built that system. We've been giving them welfare for decades. They belong to us. They reserve the worst vitriol and the worst hatred for black Americans. Oh, but it's for white Americans too. It's for white Americans too now. They're coming after everybody's families, right? They're coming after everybody's reputations if you don't kowtow to what they want. They're coming after everybody's children. The left seeks nothing more than absolute power, and we cannot give it to them. How many people in this room have my book? So you guys know that the person that inspires me to do what I do every single day is my grandfather, who is still alive, right? And I always leave people with his story because I think it's one of the most inspirational stories to walk out of the room with, because you have to know that despite all the terrible things that are happening in this country, I remain optimistic. I am a happy warrior. I am always smiling. I am always laughing. I am never miserable, and I think that's what they hate the most. And the reason is because I've got something they can't take away from me, right? I've got genuine, pure love and an understanding for what is genuine and what is purity and what is love. And I have my grandfather as an example, as the ultimate pillar of my life, really. My grandparents, both of my grandparents, my grandmother passed in 2013, which was a part of my awakening and my return to the conservative principles that were taught in their household when I was growing up. My grandfather was raised in the South, in the segregated South, in North Carolina. And one of the most fascinating things about hearing his stories of what it was like to grow up with the real Ku Klux Klan. You know, they like to talk about Klansmen now. If you ever want to get a leftist upset when they talk about Klansmen, say, where are they? They go, well, you keep bringing up the Klan. Where are they? Like, where are their meetings? Where are they having them? You know, it's kind of just become like an idea now that they like to throw around when they're talking about Republicans and conservatives. But when my grandfather grew up, it was the real Klansmen. You know, the real hooded knightsmen that would come around and they would harass and they would do terrible things to black Americans, among them being my grandfather and his father. They hated my grandfather's father. And so I remember I asked my grandfather about 3 years ago, we were sitting down and just kind of talking about life and reminiscing about his childhood, because I'm at that age now where I just want to know everything. Right? I want the wisdom. I want to know every story of his childhood. I want to know what it was like. I don't want to lose those memories for the Owens family. And he talked about the Klansmen shooting bullets into his home at night. And I'm sitting there, you know, eyes wide. And he said, we'd run to the back of the house. I was a boy. We'd all run to the back of the house and dive under the bed. And then I see this almost smile come across his face. When you slip back into a fond memory, and he says, and my daddy would grab the shotgun and shoot back at them boys. It's just, think about that. Think about that. A man who lived through real segregation, through real racial injustice, doesn't look back at those times in the way that people who have lived through absolutely nothing do. He says to me, it was just a different time. It was just a different time. And he has never once, ever, in raising us up, me, my cousins, he's never once uttered one bad word about white people. That tethers me to something, a different truth, a deeper truth that I think most people should realize. If you are living and breathing in America today, you are a part of a generation of people that is the most privileged that have ever walked the face of the planet. Okay? Ever. We have the most privileged people that have ever lived, and they're also the most miserable. They've lived through absolutely nothing, but they're certain They are living through tragedy every single day. I ask people when they say, what inspires you? Find out what inspires you. Who's your granddaddy? Because I'll guarantee you whatever he was living through, it's a lot harder than mean tweets and being called a racist.